Good morning. It's good to be back with you this morning. I'm grateful for the warm welcome you've given us each time. I actually really love standing for the reading of the Word of God. Can y'all join me in that? Our passage this morning comes from Matthew chapter 5. It's very familiar to all of us, I'm sure, starting in verse 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. I find the timing of this passage really ironic and really funny. I don't know about you guys, but in the last 2 weeks, I have been grateful for salt that has been thrown down on the road to be trampled on and to be driven on. My family, we also lost power for a very brief amount of time, and we're grateful for candles that were set up to light our way. How many of you had to use candles? Did anybody lose power over the last 2 weeks? During the day? I know, same. It was during the day. I was grateful for the salt that let us be safe. It is kind of funny, the timing of this passage, right? There is a great deal of weight in this text. If we really take it at its word, when it says, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. Actually, that phrase, the light of the world, was a phrase that was given to a famous rabbi at the time. He was like one of the chief rabbis, and it was a real sign of honor. So for Jesus to be saying this to all of his disciples, you are the light of the world, it's a weighty thing. They probably would have said, like, who are you talking to? I'm sure you're not talking to me. And then for him to say near the end that your righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees. Oh my. If we take him serious, if we take him at his word and believe what he said, that he means what he says, this feels really like a weighty and a heavy text, something that's overwhelming, almost impossible even. But I believe if we're going to take this text seriously, I really do think Jesus wants to take him at his word and to take him serious and not to write it off. We need to understand this passage in light of its context. And I know you guys know its context. This is in the midst of the Sermon on the Mount, the collection of teachings of Jesus in the book of Matthew. I'm going to back up and go to the beginning of that so that we can understand this passage in its context a little bit more. I'm going to look at the Beatitudes, what he's saying there. We're going to land really heavily on the second half of this teaching that really, to me, is mind-blowing, that your righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees. What is he saying there? We're going to land there and put a lot of emphasis there, but I want to see it in context. The Sermon on the Mount starts with the Beatitudes, with the blessings. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers. When we look at these blessings, these conditions of blessings, we realize they are conditions of the soul. To be poor in spirit is a condition of the soul. It is not an action that we strive towards. We don't actually strive towards being poor in spirit. We don't strive towards meekness even, or even being a peacemaker. That's when we can kind of tend to say, no, we got to try to be a peacemaker. I don't know about you, but I've seen people who've tried to be peacemakers. If they are not peacemakers in their soul, if it is not a condition of our soul to be a peacemaker, all of our efforts at striving towards peace, they usually don't get us anywhere, right? These Beatitudes, which are what Jesus says are blessed. These are the conditions of our soul under which Jesus said, "Blessed are you. Blessed are you when you're poor in spirit." And when we hear this term of blessing, and in the context of this passage, when we go down to the end, he says, "I am not creating a new law." We know blessing was deeply tied to covenant. So the people who are listening to Jesus in this text, when they said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," they were, "Oh, we're talking about something new here." In the law, there was blessings that was given in the covenant, right? You will dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. But it was tied to a lot of things that at the time were they were considered kind of lines in the sand. Don't cross this line. Don't commit this sin, and you will receive the blessing of God. And Jesus is in a way turning that on its head here and saying, "Blessed are those who are poor in spirit." He is taking the law and saying, this is the condition of the heart by which you are blessed. Moving forward, he moves into salt and light. You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. These are two things also that do their job. They are effective in their job based on what they are. They're effective based on what they are. A salt does not try to be salty. You cannot it doesn't strive and work hard at being salty. Either it is salty or it is not. And if it's not, it's thrown out. This is the purpose. This is what he's saying here. Can it be made salty again? No. This is not something we strive at. This is not something we put effort towards. You are. You are the salt of the earth. Salt at that time was not used to melt ice. It was actually used as primarily as preservation. It was a preservative. I think that's what he was talking about. You are to be a preservative for the earth. I actually love the phrase salt of the earth. I think of that kind of phrase when I think of people who take care of others. When I think about the Eagle Scouts of the world, those who are taking care and looking out for the good. I think about it when I think about farmers who are really taking care of the earth. They are the salt of the earth. They're preserving what is good and beautiful in God's creation and removing some of the things that are harmful, right? I was thinking about being the salt of the earth, and if I'm honest, if I look around at our earth and what's happening in our world, I can kind of wonder, how much of this do I want to preserve, actually? And so it kind of made me do a little bit of research. I was kind of trying to understand what it is about salt that is a preservative effect. What happens when you throw salt on a virus? What happens when you throw salt on something that you don't actually want to preserve, right? Salt, and I learned a little bit about it. Salt in its essence, when it goes on food, when we put salt on food, it dehydrates. If there's bacteria on the food, it will dehydrate it and kill it. So its very presence not only preserves what is good, but pushes out and makes what is not good unable to stay there any longer. And that is just so beautiful about salt, right? This is what Jesus is talking about. When you are the salt of the earth, you're preserving what is good, and your very presence pushes out and makes uninhabitable those things that are not good in this world anymore. Light, very similar, right? Light by its very existence drives out darkness. It doesn't have to do something. When light is present, darkness cannot remain. There's no striving in there. It just is. Its very existence is what makes it effective. Then we move from there, and we move into, Jesus talks about the law and righteousness. And in the context of the Sermon on the Mount, this second half of our reading from today, I believe, is in some way like a thesis for the entire sermon. This is kind of like his main point. He teases it out throughout the rest of the sermon. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. We move from characteristics of salt and light, who by their very existence drive out darkness and remove impurities, to conversation about the law. It can kind of feel a little bit like a left turn in the middle, doesn't it? It feels like, what are you talking about? We went from salt and light to the law and the prophets. But Jesus is actually emphatically saying he's not making a left turn at all. The blessings that he talks about in the Beatitudes are hinting at the covenant, the law, and the prophets that are all centered around the covenant. And he is telling us here that the law is a demonstration of the Spirit and character of God that is put into action in a particular time and place. The law itself was intended to be an epiphany, a revealing of who God is. God kicks off the law with saying, be ye holy as I am holy. It actually starts with the condition of your soul. It starts with who you are. Be holy as I am holy. And it goes on to explain what that looks like in that particular time and in that particular place. He's saying you are salt, you are light. He goes on to explain that even further on into this Sermon on the Mount. He says, you have heard it said, do not kill. I say, do not be angry. He's taking his listeners from the letter of the law into the spirit of the law, which is where the law really was intended to be all along, was in the spirit. Be ye holy as I am holy. This is something that's deep in our spirit, right? To be holy is to be like God, and it is something that is existing inside of us. It's not following the law to the letter does not create holiness inside of us. It is holiness inside of us that allows us to live out the character of God in the world. We have this idea that the law given by Moses is like just these rule books, these lines painted in the sand. If you don't cross them, then you will be holy. You'll be made holy. They will be just like God. But when holiness is understood to be self-protecting, it ceases to be in line with the character of God. Just look at Jesus. We can agree Jesus was holy, yes? Jesus was far from self-protecting, wasn't he? He seemed to not care a thing about himself. Not about his own reputation. He ate with sinners and prostitutes and tax collectors. He didn't care what he looked like. He didn't, the Pharisees really thought he didn't care anything about the law. He was healing on the Sabbath and breaking all kinds of rules. So how is Jesus holy if he is breaking their law? Jesus is the picture of the law lived out in his time. The law was a picture of the character of God lived out in that time. This is the purpose of the law all along, was to give the people of God a chance to see what God would look like if he lived in their time. Don't go and spread your skin diseases around. Take care of other people. It can seem kind of tedious, right? Like when you read through the law and you look at it and you're like, there's a lot in here and it's really meticulous. I think God really meticulously desires to reveal himself to us. He really wanted people to understand what he was like. What would he do in the midst of sickness? What would he do in the midst of suffering and death? What would he do with the stranger that was among them, with the poor and the needy? And so he gave them very particular ways to follow, these little breadcrumbs, much like we teach children, right? Like it starts out with very meticulous rules, right and wrong. This is when you cross the street. This is when you don't. This is how you write your letters. We tell them very meticulous details of how to live. And they grow into an understanding of why. We want you to be safe. We actually care and love you and want you to be safe. You don't hit other people because we love other people and respect them. Things like that. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law at that time took the law and made it into a thing of self-preservation. It was something that you lived by, these lines in the sand. You lived by the boxes that were drawn by the law in order to protect yourself from any kind of sin or impurity so that we can receive the blessing of the covenant, right? That wasn't the heart or the spirit of the law at all. The heart and the spirit of the law was to become more like God, not just for the blessing, but so that all the people around them, the nations around them, would be able to look and see, wow, that's different. They were made to be a blessing for the nations. They were made to live in the holiness of God so that others could see what God was like. In 2019, Miriam Swanford was at New Room, and she shared this picture of holiness that has just stuck with me ever since. I've since learned that she was quoting from a theologian named Calvin Samuel, who lives in Antigua. But she describes holiness, the way we think of it quite often, is a pair of white jeans or maybe a white dress shirt for you men, right? Holiness is something that we guard and we protect. If you're wearing white jeans, you're going to pay attention to where you sit down. If you're wearing that white shirt, you're not going to go out for spaghetti. You're going to think about what you order, right? Am I right? If you're wearing something white, you protect it. You guard it from any kind of impurities. You don't want to get soiled. You hang it right up when you're done with it. You don't even lay around on the couch on those kind of things. You just hang it right back up. Keep it protected. And she said that is the way we treat holiness now. This is the way the Pharisees certainly treated the law. They, not only did they follow the law, but they built up additional fences around the law so that if that's the line, we're going to make sure we stay way back here. That way we can be sure we're safe from crossing the line. We don't want any of that cursed business. We want all the blessing. She flipped all that on its head, and it's just stuck with me that holiness is not the white jeans. Holiness is the bleach that makes the jeans white. Holiness is still something that's guarded and protected. You don't want to spill bleach on anything, right? Bleach is something you still handle with care, right? You handle bleach with care. The holiness is what makes the jeans white. It is not the white jeans that is protected, but it is the thing that's meant to be spilled out into the dark places, into the places that need cleansing. This is the purifying agent. Holiness is the purifying agent, not that thing to guard and to keep pure. I think Jesus says that here in this passage, that holiness is not a perfectionistic understanding of following the law and being holy. We don't strive to be light. Holiness is the lampstand. Holiness is putting our light, who we are, out there for the world to see. It is what is on display so that others can see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Later in this passage, he actually says, don't perform your acts of righteousness for all to see and to praise you in the holy place, which feels like this, wait a second, we're going to do it for others to see, but don't display it. Actually, when you look at it, it says, do not perform your works of righteousness. And this says, let your good works be known. Let your light shine before others. It's the difference between a performative, check out my white jeans, like going on the stage, strutting it out, and simply being holy. When we are made holy, our actions must change. Bleach can't help but change things. When holiness is poured out in us from God, it will impact us. We will look different. Things will be made different around us. When Jesus was asked, he summarized the law as loving God and loving neighbor. It's summarized by God's character, which is love. The law was made to demonstrate what love looks like when it's lived out in community. I was mentioning the teachers of the law, they would put that fence out, right? There's a story of that happening even now. They were so scrupulous even at that time and even now that they tithe from the small spices that they obtained from their herb gardens. there's even the heart of this devotion to God is shown by modern-day Orthodox Jews. There's a story that in early 1992, there were tenants that let 3 apartments in an Orthodox neighborhood in Israel burn to the ground while they were busy asking the rabbi whether a telephone call to the fire department would violate the Sabbath in their Jewish law. And because they're forbidden to use the phone on the Sabbath, it breaks an electrical current, which is considered a form of work. And it took a half hour for the rabbi to really chew and ponder on this because they want to be sure we get it right? Because if we cross that line, then we're going to endure the curse and not receive the blessings. He decided yes, that would be work. But in the meantime, the fire spread to 2 neighboring apartments and burned down. They totally missed the heart of the law, right? Totally missed it. And this to us is like anathema. We're like, what? How could you? I think this outcome sounds outrageous to us. And I think it's because it goes against the grain of how I would describe the summary of the law of our time. I think if I were to summarize the common law of our time, it would be to do no harm. I think this is somewhat of an obsession of ours, to do no harm. This is where all of our medical practice comes from. It's built on doing no harm. It's become a bit of a mantra. It's behind many of the values that we consider in our American society is to do no harm. I'm afraid that in all of our efforts to do no harm, we frequently lead to spiritual atrophy. We think that if we do nothing, then surely we can do no harm, right? But by doing so, we neglect to account for the intricate, interwoven nature of all of our lives and all of creation even. One of my favorite authors is Marilyn Robinson. I like to read a lot. I love to read about deep things through novels, so you'll hear that from me frequently. But in her novel, Jack, she actually explores this understanding of harmlessness through the character Jack. Jack is a wayward preacher's son who leaves his hometown and his Presbyterian father's house really under a cloak of shame. He has made mistakes throughout his childhood and a big mistake in his college years that he just feels he can't even show his face any longer in his hometown. After he leaves, he commits himself to a life of harmlessness. He is convicted by what he has done. He knows the harm he has caused, and in his effort to appease this conviction, he runs away. He just leaves, and he commits himself to going to a new place and doing no harm. This is the ultimate goal of his life, is harmlessness, and he struggles to live up to it. He is constantly, every time he bumps into something, comes up against a wall, and even in his efforts to do no harm, he gets in trouble and he does harm. There's one story where he is actually trying to return money that he knows has been stolen, and so he takes it back to the store, the pawn shop where he knows it's been stolen from, and on his way there, the police intercept him, and they find him with stolen money, and he ends up in jail, which just further depresses his own attempts at being harmless. Throughout his adult life, he refuses to go home to see his father because he knows his pastor father is still waiting for his wayward son to come back to the Lord and to live a righteous life. And he knows in all his efforts, he's never been able to live up to this righteous life. He doesn't want to hurt his father. He doesn't want to harm his father, so he stays away. But he also is torn because he knows that in staying away, he is harming his father. But just the fact that he's gone is painful to his father. His life is a demonstration of how the pursuit of harmlessness is completely futile. It is completely futile. We can't actually be harmless because we are so interwoven and so connected. We can't actually disconnect ourselves from the world around us as much as we want to. Don't we want to sometimes just disconnect ourselves? We see the pain and the brokenness in the world, and we want to take a step back. And we want to say, no, I'm not going to participate. I'm afraid that anything I do, any effort I can make would only add to the harm that is out there. And so we step back. I see this in missions a lot. Guys, I'm in the missions world. I work for a missions agency, and there's been a lot of harm that's been done in missions over the years. It's been tied to colonialism and to many other harmful practices in missions, dependency and all of that. And what I've seen in the local church these days is that churches says, in the effort to do no harm, we've just taken a back pedal, a step back and said, no, we don't want to create dependency. No, we don't want to do harm. Meanwhile, we're leaving a third of the world who doesn't know Jesus and cannot know the name of Jesus without someone going. That was near and dear to my heart, of course. But that's the thing. We can't approach the law or sin as something we fixate on for the sake of doing no harm. What Jesus tells his hearers here, we must heed as well. Your righteousness must surpass that of the Pharisees. Now, how in the world is that hopeful news in the midst of this? It's hopeful because what he did not say is you must avoid sin. He didn't say avoid all pain and avoid all suffering. What he actually said is blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. These have to be put together because when we pursue righteousness, we cannot pursue self-preservation. Jack, at the end of the novel, his back is against the wall. He has gotten himself in a position where he knows he cannot attain harmlessness. I don't want to give away too much. He's fallen in love. He has fallen in love with someone he's not allowed to fall in love with. And that feeling is mutual. To stay away would to do great harm. But their love is forbidden, so to love would also bring great harm. What he realizes is the most noble thing that he could do was to pursue love. It would mean pain, but pain endured for love's sake is quite different than harm. When we see the law as doing no harm, as working to avoid pain or suffering, to avoid the curse and only receive the blessings, we miss the entire point. It is through pain and suffering that Jesus worked out our own redemption. In the Beatitudes, Jesus turns it all on his head, and he says, blessed are the poor, those who mourn. Blessed are you when people persecute you. How much of our lives are centered around avoiding poverty, loss, and the rejection of others? That one kind of hurts a little bit. But these things must come. In our pursuit of holiness, these things come. We don't have to seek them out. We don't seek out poverty of spirit. We don't seek out reasons to mourn. But as we engage with the world in an honest way, not trying to take a step back, not trying to fence ourselves off from it to protect our holiness, but as we engage, as we are light in darkness, as we are salt of the earth, it will result in sadness. It will result in mourning. It will result in a hungering and a thirsting for righteousness. These things will be born in us as we pursue both God and his holiness and the world. We often take our light, we say it's too small, it's not good enough, and we try to hide it. We try to hide from the darkness. We fear the darkness overcoming. How many times do we fear the darkness overcoming our light? We never say it that way. We never say it that way. We say, oh, my light is too small. It couldn't make that big of a difference. Do you not believe in the power of light to overcome darkness? When we try, I love this passage. The version we read today said it, hiding it under a bowl. Another one said hiding it under a basket. I think a basket's so woven, right? If you were to actually hide a burning candle under a basket, what's going to happen? That basket's going to catch on fire. The light that was once bringing good and brightness to the world is now bringing destruction. When we hide it, we cause pain and harm. We are meant to be the light of the world. How many of you are aware the bishops, actually, our bishops sent out a letter to the church this week based on these verses? How many of you were able to see that this week? Not too many of you saw that. Yeah, I'd like to be able to quote for you from our bishops to be able to share their heart for us as Global Methodists as we become salt and light. They put that passage first, and I encourage you to go and find it. It's on the Global Methodist website. But they say we must speak and act against evil. Yet we boldly proclaim that apart from the transforming work of Jesus in our lives and in the lives of those around us, change will be elusive. May we always see Jesus as hope and the solution to a broken and desperate world, and carry the gospel and kingdom values into every call for change. We urge every Global Methodist to live boldly in our mission and purpose as the Church of Jesus Christ. God invites us to partner with Him in offering hope, healing, and peace in a different way through the one called Jesus. I would add to this to say we must embody a different way. We must be the salt and light. We can't long for it. We must become it. If we refuse to be transformed internally, or if we refuse to be present in the earth, either one of these makes us useless in the kingdom of heaven, right? If we cannot be salt, or if we can't be in the earth, if we can't be light in a dark place, these two things must come together. The light must come in contact with darkness. The salt must come in contact with the earth. To follow Jesus is to be changed from the inside out and sent into the world as a people who are willing to be seen, to love boldly, and to trust that God uses even suffering to bring about redemption. It is quite possible when we engage with the world, we will endure suffering, we'll endure harm, even to ourselves. It is through this that Jesus has always brought about redemption. It's always been the way. And it's the way He will do it today. It's the way He'll do it here in Lawrenceville. As an invitation, I want to, again, quote from our bishops. I think they have a lot to say to us. If you go back and read the letter, they give actually 6 points of ways that we must live as a church in order to be the salt and the light in our places. And I'm just going to start with the first one. I'm just going to read the first one. I think there's something here for us. Our bishops say pray. Prayer is always the right first response and the best ongoing posture for those who profess faith in Jesus Christ. Pray for the many areas of the world that God may work in hearts, including yours, to bring about His peace and desire. Pray for the salvation of others. Remember, the Apostle Paul reminds us that first and foremost, much of what we are experiencing is rooted in spiritual conflict when he writes, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." But how do we pray in the face of such evil? And in here, I want to encourage us to return to the Beatitudes. If you sense us in your prayers a spirit of poverty in your own soul, lean into that. That is not something to overcome in prayer. That's something to take to God in prayer. This is actually where the blessing comes. When we say, I have nothing to offer. I have no words. That is okay. Take your nothing, present it before God and say, I have nothing. I have no words. That is where God brings His blessing. Do you mourn? Do you weep when you see what God is doing? Where the places where God is absent in this world, the pain and the evil in our world? That's the best place to start, to take that to the Lord in prayer, to sow our tears of mourning so the Lord can form in us His Spirit that we can be the righteousness in the world. I can't go through all of them or I'll risk preaching another sermon. But go back and look at the Beatitudes. Consider the Beatitudes as they connect to us being salt and light. Pray through them. When they feel familiar to you, know that is where a blessing is. And that is the beginning of being salt and light in the earth.
Thank you for watching. We pray that you were blessed by the message. We hope you will join us for worship in person on Sunday mornings at 10:30 at Cruz Middle School. You can connect with us online on social media or at GwinnettGMC.org. Have a blessed day.